But you know what? I'm not even embarrassed. You know what?
So work.
It's being used. Exactly.
If I want to work, then you got it.
Exactly. It's being used.
Yeah, I'll listen every now and then during the survey, I'll sit here and go, oh, let's go over it.
Well, King Rip is also, it's also got a real leather cover.
It is.
So I gotta get it fixed, I can't get it placed.
Then I tell you, this coffee shop, this guy does it, for the second visit. He's got the, he'll look at it, yeah.
Well, I'll look at it, how much do you charge to look at it?
Downtown, but he'll get some brand new coffee, I have to bring it back.
Oh, I hope so.
But no matter where you go.
Oh, yeah. Whatever.
Barbecue.
Hold on. 5, everybody for in the front of it? Yeah. No, ma'am. Yes. Oh my word! Nobody dare do that. Oh my goodness! Wow. For the world turned upside down. Well, and remember, your yeah. I think if we keep it, maybe a little bit. Yeah, we're there. Thank you, yes. She was ready.
We had 10.
That'll do it. That'll do it. Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We're in Luke chapter 9, looking at the progress that Jesus is making in his ministry. Of course, he's been very, very busy, and we're at the point where he sends the apostles to work. That's how chapter 9 begins. And we noticed, again, feeding the 5,000, how they share in the miracle. We understand in the context of what Jesus is trying to do and accomplish with them, why he'd do that. So we finished up, and we'll pick up here on these events at Caesarea Philippi. I don't believe Luke says that that's where these things happen, but of course they do. Where there's conversation that Jesus has with the disciples about their faith, about who they think that he is. And he, in verse 18 to 20, is where he starts talking with them, and he asks, who do the crowds say that I am? Who do the crowds say that I am? And of course, Luke is always telling us about crowds. There's always a crowd of people around. And he's not only is he performing miracles, but Jesus has said a lot, and people have opinions. People talk. People are trying to figure things out as best they can. And we even saw on Wednesday, Herod is sort of an example of that. He's trying to figure out who Jesus is. Is John the Baptist? I beheaded John, he says. Could it be him? Or they think that maybe he's one of the prophets who've risen. They think maybe he's Elijah and Jeremiah, some of the others. And there's reasons. We won't get into all of it, but there's reasons for the specific prophets they think perhaps Jesus is. But you could just imagine, the conversation probably could have gone on for a long time about what the apostles had heard other people talking about, what the buzz is. And but Jesus focuses the conversation. It's not just about what the crowds think. It's about, what do you think? And, I think I said Wednesday, it's one thing to, talk about other people. It's something altogether different to talk about you and what you think. Because what you think, what I think, matters. Matters. Makes all the difference. And so Jesus asks them, well, what do you think? And I wish we knew a little more about this, what's going on here. Wish we could kind of get a picture, a snapshot of their faces when he asked that. Did they kind of tense up and start to squirm a little bit? Did some of them maybe kind of start perspiring a little bit? But Peter, he speaks up. He speaks up. And he makes this as it's described. And I think that's a great description. He says, the Christ of God. The Christ of God. And, of course, when you look at in Matthew's account, there's more information given, but appreciate how Luke sets this up. It's very simple. It's direct. It's to the point. You are the Christ of God. This is what Luke is trying to convey to us. This is what he wants us to know about who Jesus is. And that's who Peter thinks that he is. Now, what does that mean? Peter doesn't know. He doesn't know what that means. And that's seen in what unfolds, because Jesus goes on to tell them what the Christ of God is about to do. What God's anointed is about to do. What's he going to do?
Sorry.
He's going to die. Now that's not all of what Jesus tells them, but in what's described in 21 to 27, this is the first time they received this news. We all have stories about times in our lives where we receive news that news is news because it changes the world. It changes our world. And that's what went on here. Jesus says he's going to go to Jerusalem and he's going to give himself over. Now they know that there's this conspiracy that is in the background, and Jesus just says, hey, I'm going to go and turn myself in and give myself over to and the elders of Israel, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to be raised the third day. Now we can unpack that and say, well, there's a series of details, important details that Jesus gives them. But all they heard was what? They're going to be put to death. That's what they hear. They don't hear anything else. They don't have questions about. All they hear is he's going to die. And of course, not if they have anything to do about it. And that's the impression that I have of. Again, Luke doesn't go into all of that, but they're trying to figure all that out. I mean, it's one thing to try to understand that Jesus is the Christ of God. That's a huge acknowledgement. But what's the Christ of God about? Why is he here? What's he up to? You mean he's about more than just performing miracles and teaching? Yeah, he is. He's not just a healer. He's not just a good teacher come from God. The Christ of God is come to, well, save us from sin through his death. And then God's going to raise him up again. So there's a lot that they're trying to work through here. Yeah.
Their mindset at this time is still the Christ coming and setting up an earthly kingdom. You know, they haven't put together, you know, what Jesus' purpose is, and they have a plan for him to be, you know, their king.
Yeah. Yeah, the Christ of God. Well, what is, you know, their understanding of the Christ of God is very different than what Jesus would tell them. And so he goes on here in 23 and starts talking and really confusing. I mean, this is going right over the top of their heads. You know, they're just reeling at what Jesus is telling them. Maybe they're beginning to reassess whether or not he is the Christ of God. And then Jesus says, if anyone come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of his Father and of the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God. So, this paradox, you know, living by dying, take up your cross daily. We say all of the time that the cross only meant one thing. It is not. There's nothing good. There's nothing positive associated with crucifixion. And Jesus starts talking about taking up your cross daily. So what we can see, well, this idea of denial, there's sacrifice that he's talking about, but sort of like on another occasion, Peter makes the connection, well, we've made sacrifices, so what do we get? Hadn't they made sacrifices to this point? Well, they had. But in many ways, they're just getting started with that. But I think it is significant what Jesus says here. And in Mark's account of this, Mark and Luke are similar. Matthew's account doesn't include all of what is stated here. If any of him, he talks about whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him. Will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in glory? Are they embarrassed by it? Are they ashamed of his words at this point? I think so. They cannot reconcile in their minds how this thing goes through the way Jesus has just described it. But so it is with us. I mean, this is getting at the idea of what does it mean to be a follower? What does it mean to be a Christian? I mean, it's at the core of that. The cross is at the core of it, right? New life is at the core of it. And that's what he's stating. You know, you'll find no more fundamental statement of our faith than what Jesus says on this occasion, about denying ourselves and taking up our cross daily to follow. So it's now we're getting to what it really is all about at this point, and a tremendous test of faith for the disciples. Cindy?
You know, I think we could all ask ourselves who we think Jesus is, and I think that changes throughout your lifetime, depending how you see him. Even starting with kids, you know, who he is. Was he a teacher? Once you do that. So now, at my age, he was the anointed, okay, and he is coming to be the king, and it's not the king of the earthly, but you just think, I'll have a good life if I follow Jesus, okay? And then he's going to die, so that means there's something better, but you don't see that then. But now we know there's something better. He's a king. He's going to die. And then with take up your cross, you've got to be willing to do the same thing. This life means nothing. We're going to be much happier, like you mentioned in your lesson.
Yeah, it's a different thing that they're doing what they're envisioning. They're still thinking that there's going to be some temporal benefits to this thing. That's where you get into the discussion about who's the greatest. They think, you know, they're going to be able to manage this kingdom, and they're going to have power, like the Romans have power over them. It's like as if now it's going to be our turn, and it's Jesus is redefining power. He's giving a redefinition to quite frankly the very purpose of life. So he does all of this, has this conversation, and you know they're just trying to understand it. And for 8 days, they're in Luke's account. They're trying to grapple with this. What does this mean? Don't you wish you knew what was in between? What the conversation was for 8 days in Caesarea Philippi after Jesus tells them for the very first time he's going to die and be raised again? What was that like? It was something. But after 8 days, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, takes them up the mountain. Takes them up Mount Hermon. And if you know anything at all about spiritual warfare, Mount Hermon is a significant site. That's where the sons of God came down and brought human corruption into the world in Genesis 6. Mount Hermon is the physical representation of everything evil and unholy in the world. Jesus takes them up this mountain and does a couple of things. We talk about this transfiguration, and of course our imaginations just sort of run wild in terms of what this looked like and who is present. I mean, they thought Jesus was maybe Elijah, and well, hey, there he is. And so it's an overwhelming experience for the three of these men. Peter being the one who, from what we know in Scripture, was the one who was most vocal in opposition to what Jesus was going to be doing. But, well, he sees that, no, he is the Christ of God. And once again, there is validation that is given from the Father about who he is. And it's significant that this time it's not, this is my son. It's, listen to him. Listen to him. They hadn't been listening to him. They heard him. But there is not just doubt. I would say there's probably rebellion that's starting to foster as they reassess things in this new light. And listen to it. At this point, what Jesus needs is love and support from these men at this pivotal time as his hour is quickly approaching. And then in terms of spiritual warfare, it's very clear. God is reclaiming God is reclaiming what belongs to Him through what His Son is accomplishing. That's just a quick summary of the Transfiguration. There's a lot more that could be said. If there's anything you want to mention about it.
I always thought it was remarkable that Peter recognized them, that he revealed to them who they were. Because obviously they didn't have a picture book to recognize them.
Yeah. Yeah, people have always wondered, how did he know? How did he know?
He revealed to them, obviously.
It kind of, when you say that, and it's interesting because that's what Jesus told them in response to, who do you say that I am? You're the Christ of God. He says, flesh and blood didn't reveal it. It was my Father. And the reason we know anything at all about God is because of revelation. It's not discovery. It's revelation. We're here talking about these things today because of revelation. And there's nothing whatsoever to do with discovery. Which gets us back to this fundamental point about how we are saved by grace through faith. Revelation is grace. Go ahead.
It also indicates that Moses and Elijah were cognizant of things that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were talking to him about.
Yeah.
What's going to be happening.
Yeah.
So we sometimes think, well, there's no way we can know what's going on because we might know about some loved one that's not going to heaven. Mm-hmm. But they knew about this.
Yeah. Yeah, they did it. In Ephesians 3, it talks about how the heavenly host, they were watching. They're watching, trying to learn how the Father was going to save humans. And they learned, he says, they learned that it was the wisdom of God being revealed through the church. Is what they learned. So we, again, when it comes to the spiritual realm, we just kind of put that out of sight, out of mind. And to do so greatly disadvantages us in understanding our place in this much bigger conflict that has been going on for a very long time.
And Dave, where'd you see, I'm missing it, where it says Mount Hermon?
Yeah.
Where's that listed at?
Mount Hermon, that is the mountain in Caesarea Philippi. When Jesus says upon this rock, you get into this discussion of, well, what's the rock? And if you'd ask those men what the rock was, the only rock in Caesarea Philippi was Mount Hermon. That's right. You also see the supremacy of Jesus here. That's an important point of this, right? Peter wants to, let's worship all three of you. Because of, let's not leave anybody out, and that's not at all. Jesus is not on par with Moses. He's not on par with Elijah. He's not one of the prophets. I mean, he does things that are prophetic, but he's not an equal. He is a superior. And that is brought out very clearly in the Transfiguration. I have thought, and you probably have too, the Transfiguration serves very similar purposes that the resurrection does. Because the resurrection is what elevates Jesus as supreme. And the Transfiguration does that in a more narrow way, right? This is about Peter, James, and John. And for them to have faith in Jesus and in thinking about what they're going to be doing, moving in time and carrying His message to the world. Anything else about that before we move along?
In verse 30 is talking about the conversation, with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Could you imagine that conversation?
Yeah. Again, it's tell us more. Tell us more. All right. So in 37, it's more of the same. Now, when they come down from the mountain, if you go to Matthew's account, there's some discussion, as you could imagine, about the meaning and an implication of all of this. And Jesus explains how John was a symbol of Elijah and answering some questions that would have been commonly asked given what Jesus was doing. But here in verse 37, we find Jesus casting out an unclean spirit, casting out a demon. On the next day it says, when he'd come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Behold, a man from the crowd cried out, Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he's only a child. Behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out and convulses so that he foams at the mouth and shatters him and will hardly leave him. And I beg your disciples to cast it out. But they couldn't. Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring the son here. While he was coming, the demon threw him to the ground and convulsed him. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy and gave him back to his father. And all were astonished at the majesty of God. So, Jesus gave the apostles authority, right, to perform miracles and cast out demons at the beginning of the chapter. And now we see where they're doing that, but they failed. They failed. They just couldn't cast out this unclean spirit. And I suppose we get a sense of why in what Jesus says here, that this is an issue of faith. And so Jesus, again, we're not surprised. He has no problem. He continues to command very easily with his words for the demons to be cast out. And of course, later on, Jesus is going to give them an explanation about this. And I think it does show us that there is a progression of faith that they're going through.
Jesus scolds them, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does. I mean, faithless and twisted generation.
Yeah. I don't think that was just directed at the apostles.
Not just to the apostles.
So he's basically saying, this is what I came for, but I'll do this.
Yeah. Yeah. This is...
The only thing about it is they were the only ones that could heal this young man, though.
Yeah.
And they didn't have enough faith to do it, or they could not do it. So who else would he be talking to?
Yeah. And how is that a reflection on Jesus?
Right.
It undermines him. And that should teach us something about what our lack of faith reflects on him. So we try to relate to what's going on here. Anything else?
It's interesting the kind of the three segments that we've looked at. Peter says that Jesus is the Son of God. And then it talks about the transfiguration where God says, this is my beloved Son. And then the person that comes to him says, I've got an only son that needs healing. It's just an interesting progression.
Yeah. Those details.
It's kind of a look back to maybe the Old Testament and Moses on the mountain. The whole story about being on the mountain and coming down off the mountain and having to deal with sin. Yeah, it's kind of the same.
It could be
thing.
Yeah, you see that, and it kind of goes back to some things we said at the very beginning of the study. That's what's happening, right? That Jesus' ministry is about the new Exodus, and so when you see those similarities, they're not accidents. No, they're not coincidental. I mean, that's the framework that we're given to understand what he's doing.
I also see too, like he's still getting on to them. Peter's just confessed. He knows who he is, but not grasping what he does. When you think about what we're told, like he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder. Like there's still that part where we don't always get it. We believe that he is, but we don't always fully have that faith to believe he's going to do what he says.
Yeah. And where do you think he keeps getting after them? I mean, think about where we are.
Time is short.
Time is running out. Time is short. Yeah, absolutely. Time is running out. And so there's this sense of urgency. You think about what he said to some of the cities where he did most of his work, and they didn't believe. I mean, he just rips them. Says that Sodom and Gomorrah are going to have an easier judgment than you. So you get this sense that, hey, you've had opportunity, you've had time, get with it. And we probably could learn from that as well. That we're given time and opportunity. Well, what do we do with it? What do we do with time and opportunity?
They kind of lets them have it in verse 44.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it as clear as you can possibly make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think the people didn't have faith in the apostles being able to do it either, when it says the generation saying that the people didn't have faith that the apostles could do it and only Jesus could do it?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what all went on with the apostles. We're told they're sent out, and we have this little event. We don't know so much about all of the reaction, but I do think that the failure to cast out this demon, it undermines what this whole thing is about. So in 43, Jesus foretells his death again. While they were marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered in the hands of men." But they did not understand this saying, and it was concealed from them, so that they might not perceive it. They were afraid to ask him about this saying. So they don't, he says it again, right? And they don't grasp it. I don't really know exactly what Luke means when he tells us that they were prevented from understanding. But this is the second time where Jesus gives them this information that even though the transfiguration has occurred, the plan hasn't changed. The plan hasn't changed. On one hand, maybe you think after the transfiguration that the crucifixion seems even more impossible. Why does it have to be that way? If Jesus has this power, if God has marked him out the way that he has. But I think that the takeaway here is that nothing's changed. We're going to Jerusalem, and this is going to happen.
Could their fear have concealed this? Because when you read that last verse, it says that they were afraid to ask him about this saying. So fear can conceal things from us.
Yeah, that's a good observation there. Sure. So who's the greatest? Who is the greatest? An argument arose among them as to which of them was the greatest. Why do you think that was the case?
Well, he had only taken 3 of them to the mountain with him.
Yeah. Why didn't you take me? Why didn't you take me? You know, as parents, we hear that, right? How come I didn't get to go? And, competition, yeah, rivalry, and so I think we can understand why there would be some dissension, and there's different details in different accounts about this whole situation. But broadly, I think we know that they're thinking that Jesus is supposed to overthrow the Roman government, and that's at the heart of what they think. And so James and John, or Peter, James, and John, do they get an in because Jesus took them on the mountain? You know, a little while before, the week earlier, he took Peter, James, and John to Darius' house. Didn't take the rest of them, and so is there some favoritism at work here? Who's the greatest? In verse 47, it says, "But Jesus, knowing the reason of their hearts, took a child and put him by his side, and said to them, 'Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all is the one who is great.'" That would have been humiliating. Don't you think?
Broken pride, for sure.
Broken pride? Oh. It's hard. It's hard to have our pride broken. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, Jesus could have made the point to them any way he wanted. But instead he goes and gets a little kid. You think about kids, especially in the ancient culture. I mean, kids in the ancient world, better seen than heard, right? I know we might think that still, but you get the point. There's other times, of course, where Jesus, he does this sort of thing, where he brings a child to make a point about faith, a point about humility, a point about service and dependency, and all of the kinds of attributes the good attributes of a child that Jesus is looking for in terms of how we view him, and the kind of dependency and trust and humility that we're trying to foster. And all of the traits that in this moment, in this scene, are lacking with the apostles. They are concerned about themselves. They're not concerned about the one who's about to go to Jerusalem and die. Right? Jesus would say, let that sink into your ears. Here's again a moment where what he needs is support. He needs support from these men, and he's not getting it. It's almost as if with these two instances where they failed to cast out the demon, and now this discussion, or it's almost as if we're going backwards. Is there progress? Is there progress of faith happening here? It sure doesn't seem like it. And as Brian points out, we're running out of time, and so he's still trying to get through to them. So, in terms of, if we think about, this perception of a kingdom and their place in it, Jesus is redefining power, and what he does is he says, the Romans they use power to oppress. In my kingdom, we're going to use power to serve, and that's not how humans think. That's not how we think, right? We're always looking to get ahead. We're always looking for an advantage. We're always hoping for the day where we get to be boss. And that's common to how we think. And Jesus just turns that on its head. And to do that with the apostles, they're the ones who, in their work, they're the ones who are going to be setting the tone for that, trying to exemplify that. Jesus is the supreme example of all of that in going to the cross, and they'll recognize that in time. But he's redefining power, power in the way, in taking it back to how power is demonstrated in God's use of it in a way that He interacts with us. So it's a vital lesson that He gives them on that occasion. 49 and 50, John answered. And this it just makes you shake your head, of everything that's just happened, everything that's been said. John pipes up, Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he doesn't follow us. Now that's what a kid does. That's what an immature adult does when they've been called out. Hey, what about? We deflect. We don't want to talk about the fact Jesus has just broken my pride. What about, hey, we saw a guy out here, he was casting out demons, and he doesn't follow us. He's not part of our group. Maybe that guy was worse off than they were in their minds, right? That's how we try to rationalize and justify things. Jesus says to them, do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you. The one who is not against you is for you. And that's quite a statement to think about, not just in what was going on with them, but what goes on with us. We struggle with pride. We struggle in trying to determine who's on the inside and who's on the outside, and drawing lines and making judgments and doing things that are not our place to do. And Jesus just very simply says, if they're not against you, they're for you. Leave them alone.
I'll say something very similar, but the reverse, a couple chapters later.
Yes.
He's not with me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Is it kind of because this guy was giving Jesus kind of like free advertising almost?
I suppose.
Don't stop them, let them.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we do this today?
Pardon?
Do we do this today?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a question for each of us to ask, you know?
We talk about, like during Christmas, it's good that people are talking about Jesus, even if they're not fully understanding. And so, yeah, we do it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's good anytime somebody's talking about Jesus.
You use it as an opportunity. Use it as an opportunity to bring them closer to it. And it also shows here how Jesus is the focal point. He's the one who matters. He's the greatest. And that's what he's trying to get the apostles to see. And is they're trying to deflect. Well, hey, if this man is out here doing something in free advertising, to use that way to explain it, he's directing attention to Jesus, and that's what matters.
Do you have a speculation of who this man was that was able to do this?
I have no idea.
I mean,
Yeah.
how did he get this power, or?
Yeah. Or even, I don't know. I mean, it's really, there are a lot of questions there.
Right.
Because it's interesting if you go back to verses 37, where they couldn't cast out the demons, and now they're saying, well, why is he able to where we couldn't almost, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to make sense of it. You know, in terms of we couldn't do that, he told them, you know, this requires fasting and prayer. Again, it seems like there's a deeper faith that is necessary, and maybe they could learn from this man, and I think that's what Jesus was trying to do. Anything else?
Like you said, it's not a matter of being inside the boundaries or outside the boundaries. It's Jesus-centered, and we're either getting closer or further away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. 51. We've got Samaritans. Now, of course, we've dealt with Samaritans already, and we've talked about how one of the things that Luke does is he gives us examples of the outcast. How Jesus receives the outcast, and there was no clearer example of an outcast than a Samaritan. In 51 it says, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him, who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? But he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. So,
Here we go again.
Yeah, you know, they need a place to stay. And what do you think it means when Luke says that when they knew that his face was set, when the people in Samaria, when they learned that Jesus' face was set to Jerusalem, they wouldn't allow them to stay there? What's that mean? Yeah, no Jews. That's what that means. No Jews allowed. And again, this ethnic hatred, it boils up and is on full display. How do you react and respond to that? James and John, the sons of thunder.
Burn them down.
Burn them down. Yeah, you know, should we call fire from heaven to consume them? Again, you wonder about their state of mind, their state of heart, their ability to do these sorts of things. Again, we've seen where they couldn't cast out a demon, but now here they want to. What they want to do is they want to bring death. No, Jesus isn't about death. He's not about destruction. He's about life. He's about salvation, and that's what I think it's in Matthew where that much is included. He says you don't know the spirit that's in you. I came to save life, not to destroy it. And so you think he cares about the Samaritans. This is a great example of Jesus demonstrating love toward people who are behaving in very unloving ways, both in terms of the Samaritans and in terms of James and John. They're both in the wrong here.
Samaritans just hated them and said, no, keep moving.
Yes.
They just put it up a notch and said, well, let's just go ahead and kill them all. How about that?
Yeah. It escalates. And that's what hatred does, right? It just, and then there's no end to it. You know, we see it all, we see it in our world. Where does the killing stop? I mean, violence has no end. But here Jesus brings a different perspective to this. He's going to Jerusalem to die for the Samaritans. And eventually, James and John are going to go later on. They'll go there and preach salvation to those people. So the transformation that takes place with James and John is admirable, right? So it shows us that Jesus is for everybody. He's going to go to Jerusalem to die for everybody. And if we're going to follow him, we need to seek the salvation of everybody. Not just the people who live like us, look like us, or think like us. Everybody. I mean, everybody includes everybody. And that's really difficult for us to accept for all kinds of reasons. So it's a significant event. I think that in some ways, everything that we need to know about Jesus is wrapped up in this single event. It's a seminal moment that happens. It's every bit as fundamental as the discussion about who's the greatest. There are fuller accounts that are given elsewhere. But those, in my mind, those two events about who is the greatest and what he says in reference to the Samaritans, we learn everything we need to know about who Jesus is and what he's looking for in us. So there you have my 2 cents worth. Anything else about that before we move along?
I think it also shows, James and John are their disciples. They're right there with them, and they can be so wrong. You can be a follower of Jesus and still have moments when you are so misguided and wrong. Mm-hmm. Turn around and fix it. We see that they did because they've written what they wrote later on in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. They fixed it.
Yeah.
And they're teaching exactly opposite of what they're saying here.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So people can be wrong, mm-hmm. and they can turn around and make it right. And there's never something that cannot be overcome through Jesus.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, he changes their hearts, and it takes time. It takes time. We should be impressed with his patience with them throughout this chapter. It's very. I mean, long suffering is a great word. To describe, why didn't Jesus just call fire down from heaven and zap James and John? Would he have been in the wrong to do that? He certainly had power to do that, but that's not what he does. That's not what he's about. So he continues to be patient with them, and yes, over time you see this progression that takes place in their lives.
You just rebuke them. I mean, when they were doing wrong, you don't just. I guess
that'll work itself out.
You have to deal with sin, certainly in the right manner, but you got to deal with it.
Yeah. He doesn't wait. I mean, it's in that moment where he corrects them.
I also see the Good Samaritan. So not all Samaritans were bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we tend to do. It's a lot easier for us to put people in line.
Yeah, that's right. That's the problem with that kind of thinking. That's at the heart of the problem. Yeah. Kind of what Brian, you pointed out is that with the Pharisees, not all of them.
No, they were all bad.
Yeah. All right, we'll finish up here in 57. We learned more about the cost of following Jesus. As we were going along on the road, someone said to him, "I'll follow you wherever you go." Sound familiar? Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another he said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I'll follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And Jesus said to him, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. Surely we can see ourselves in one of these three examples. Just very common reactions to Jesus. People who want to follow him, you say with your mouth, you want to, sort of like Peter, we can say the right things, but we haven't thought it through. We haven't thought about, well, what's that mean? What's it mean to follow Jesus? And it means there's a cost. Susie?
It also teaches us that you can't just believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people who say, well, I believe, so I'm okay.
Right.
It's true. You can't just believe.
Yeah, there's no following. There's no following. Yeah. Now it also gives us more commentary on what it means to take up our cross. What does it mean to take up that's what he was saying earlier, and now Luke presented that earlier. Now he's finishing this section by this discussion. You'd say, well, Jesus, when somebody says they want to follow you, why don't you just say, come on? No, that's not what he did. He stopped them and got them to think. Got them to think. You don't like to think.
It's not how you want to do it.
Yeah, I want to follow you on my terms, and they all had their stipulations, and Jesus had a response to all their stipulations.
Yeah, it's pretty major. My dad died, and let me go bury him.
Mm-hmm.
There's him to him, I come back and follow you. And Christ said no.
Yeah.
We don't even know if his dad was dead.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he might have been really delaying.
Mm-hmm. Right. It might have been really delaying it. And we have our reasons. And our reasons are always important, significant, valuable to us. That's why there are reasons, right? That's why there are stipulations. But Jesus is making the point that now there's a cost. We are willing to, in our minds, we think, we're willing to sacrifice as long as it doesn't cost us anything. And if it doesn't cost you anything, it's not sacrifice. Sacrifice is giving something up. When the Jews sacrificed an animal, they killed an animal. They put it to death, and then it had a monetary value to it. You're giving things up that had an impact to them personally. And it also shows us who's the greatest. He's worth that because, he's going to Jerusalem to sacrifice. He's not just some sadistic kind of a cult leader here, right? That's not what he is at all. He's going to go through with this. And again, you have to wonder when he does that, when these three people learned of Jesus dying, then what did they think about what he told them on this day? It changes everything, and that's the point. It's supposed to affect us, and to enable us to reevaluate our lives in what we're doing to follow.
Didn't you say earlier that this burial was not just like we do today, a couple of days, maybe a week, it's like months?
Yeah,
their pattern or their custom?
Yeah, when somebody died, they were put in a tomb and to decompose, and then about 18, 24 months later, you come back and collect the bones and put the bones in a bone box. And so if you understand the background, Jesus is not just being heartless here or insensitive to the man's situation. It's the fact is that yes, it could have taken this guy 2 years to finally get to the point where he's ready to, now I'll follow. You don't have 2 years to wait. You need to follow now. All right. Well, we'll pick up in chapter 10 on Wednesday.
Have you ever thought about how
18 months or more.
that is the first Elijah asked Elisha to follow him. Elisha finally did it, and he asked to go back there and for the like that's the exact thing. The only difference is Elijah.
Yeah.
Or Jesus right now. Right.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's like, well, like,
Where you
walking on the water. Yeah, Psalm 77. You know, it's like, that's got to mean something.
Excuse me.
Right back.
Oh, thank you.
Didn't even notice it. I didn't feel any power of either.
I heard that. I heard that.
I don't know where they came from.
Yes. Gotta be strong, I guess, to do its job. Who are your visitors this morning?
Some friends of ours that we worship with them and live in the same neighborhood. We're down in Houston.
Oh, so they came up
And
from
they,
there?
well, they moved to Bowling Green the same time we did.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, so we're not as close, but we're not as far apart.
yeah,
It's only like
3
4 hours.
Okay.